What is going on, everybody? My name is Austin. Welcome to the channel. Today we're here to talk about Absolute Flash issue number 8, where we get a glimpse into the past of Barry Allen. He's been a pretty ambiguous character throughout the Absolute Flash run so far. We don't really know what his motives are, but this issue gives us an insight into the past of Barry Allen. Let's get right into the issue. The story begins several years ago at Keystone University, and Barry Allen is late to teach his class. He's a professor at this university. He shows up and says, "I had a faculty meeting that ran over, and despite popular theories of quantum superposition, I cannot yet be in two places at once." None of his students laugh at this joke, and he says, "What, no points for bad physics jokes? Okay, tough crowd." He continues and says, "Where were we last week? Right, breakthroughs and superconductivity. So, recent research showed that the sudden cessation or death of quantum mechanical fluctuations exhibit a series of unique behaviors that exist outside the bounds of established theory. So, who wants to talk about these breakthroughs? What insights did the assigned readings yield?" Anyone? None of his students try to answer the question, and he says, maybe we should move on to something a little less challenging, and we see someone in his class who's not a student. After class is over, we see Barry in his office talking on the phone. It's his mom, Nora Allen, and she says, "Hey Barry, it's Mom. We know you're busy, but give us a call back when you have the time." That's when someone knocks on his door and says, "Dr. Allen?" He says, "Yes. I'm sorry, should I know you? You were auditing my class this morning." And the lady says, "I was. I hope you didn't mind the intrusion. I am a big fan of your work." And he says, "Ha, right. Did Ray Palmer put you up to this?" Seemingly confirming the existence of an absolute atom, which is very, very cool. Anyways, the lady responds and says, "Hardly. My name is Eleanor Thawne. I was closely following your work at Princeton with quantum simulation and molecular electron transfer." Barry says, "That was a lifetime ago," and she replies with, "It was a crime they shut your work down. You were on the cusp of something special." But Barry says, "Yes, well, the powers that be didn't agree. I lost tenure and haven't been anywhere near a lab in nearly 5 years, Miss Thawne." And she says, "Dr. Thawne, actually. Dr. Allen, what would you say if I told you I could get funding not only to continue your own research, but to set you up to make new discoveries far beyond anything you'd imagined?" Barry says, "I'm sorry, but my work was a dead end. Princeton was right to shut me down. Even if I had the resources, I wouldn't continue." And she says, "That's a lie, and we both know it. It's merely what you tell yourself to justify wasting your time and your talent at this second-rate school. Discovery, true discovery, is the most intoxicating drug we have, and I know a recovering addict when I see one." Barry says, "You have a flair for the dramatic, Dr. Thawne, but I still don't know what it is you're even offering." And she says, "Come with me, Dr. Allen. Give me one day of your life, and I promise to show you things you only dreamed possible." We then go to Fort Fox, Colorado, where the majority of this story has taken place. Eleanor asks Barry how his flight was, and he says, "Oh, it was fine, still adjusting to the altitude a bit." And she says, "It does take a few days, but Colorado is lovely. This way, please." Barry is fascinated by everything he's seeing, and Eleanor says, "This, Dr. Allen, is my life's work and my grandfather's." And Barry's like, "Your grandfather?" She says, "Yes. Tell me, have you heard of Dr. Eobard Thawne?" Barry says, "Eobard? No." She says, "That doesn't really surprise me. He has quite literally been erased from history. These are my grandfather's journals, all his work. This, Barry, is Blue Trinity." During the height of World War II, the US commissioned a secret project operating in the shadow of Oppenheimer's Trinity atomic tests, named Blue Trinity. This classified project was led by the brilliant physicist Eobard Thawne, who claimed to be on the verge of making contact with another dimension of pure exotic living energy. His theories were far beyond anything of the time. He knew his work bridged the divide between fringe science and the supernatural. I admit some of his methods were questionable. When the military caught wind of some of these more eccentric experiments, he knew it was only a matter of time until they shut him down. But my grandfather refused to stop his work. You'll see his journals from this time describe a voice that was calling to him from this other world. The line between true genius and madness is very fine. It would have been easy to dismiss all my grandfather's antics, but what happened next justified everything. We then go outside to see Eobard Thawne standing next to this machine that we see in Fort Fox in present time. Someone in a military vehicle shows up and says, "Thawne, what the hell are you doing out here?" Eobard responds and says, "Not now, Captain Garrick. This is very delicate. I need to focus." Jay Garrick says, "None of this has been authorized." Eobard says, "Don't you see, Jay? You're about to bear witness to history. I've done it. I've finally done it." Garrick says, "Witness to what? What is all all this? And Eobard says, what we're here for. This is Blue Trinity. The machine turns on and a ball of energy spawns out of thin air. Jay Garrick says, Thawne, you need to stop. This feels wrong. But Eobard reaches towards the ball of energy and says, no, look, don't you hear it? It's saying my name. Garrick says, my God. And Eobard says, God? Yes. Yes, perhaps. Garrick runs past Eobard and says, it's over, I'm shutting it down. But before he can shut it down, Eobard pushes him into the ball of energy and Garrick gets eviscerated. With tears in his eyes, Eobard says, I'm sorry, I couldn't let you take it from me. I can't let anyone. It's mine. And Eobard Thawne was never seen again. Eleanor continues and says, thank God most of his journals were salvaged before the military shuttered everything. They were passed down to my mother and then to me. I've been trying to fill in the blanks, the missing pieces from those lost journals. Barry, looking at a whiteboard full of equations, says, This is ridiculous. And she says, I know it sounds like science fiction, Barry, but I assure you it is all very real. And Barry's like, no, not that. These equations. Barry erases them with his sleeve and she says, I worked on those for months. And Barry says, they're wrong. I'll need my equipment sent over from storage at Princeton. And Eleanor, with a smile on her face, knowing she's got Barry Allen working for her, says, of course. We then have a time skip 2 years later and Eleanor walks up behind Barry, introducing him to someone. She says, Dr. Allen, there's someone I'd like you to meet. But Barry says, I'm busy, Eleanor. She says, yes, I know, but we don't want to be rude now, do we, Barry? This is Colonel Rudy West. He and his son have just arrived. Colonel West will be leading security for the new military division of our project. Barry turns around and says, military? Eleanor, you'd promised me I'd have autonomy. Eleanor turns to look at Rudy and says, Colonel West, would you mind if I spoke to Dr. Allen alone? And he says, not at all. I need to unpack and make sure my son is getting settled anyway. We'll touch base in the morning. Colonel West walks away and Barry says, what the hell is this, Eleanor? And she says, this is how we continue to get the funding we need to complete our work, Barry. And he says, they only want weapons, Eleanor. But she says, what we are doing here is so far beyond what the government can comprehend. We give them a few new toys and in return they let us change history. That seems like a small price to pay. Speaking of which, how close are we to the first trial? And Barry says, just fine-tuning the protective gear. I'll be ready to take the team in by the end of the week. And Eleanor says, yes, about that. I've decided you won't be leading the initial team. And Barry says, what? She puts her hand on his shoulder and says, you know what happened to my grandfather. It's too dangerous, Barry, and you are far too important to lose. You lead the team remotely from here. Barry says, but our equipment is far more advanced than what your grandfather used, and the protective suits will work. Eleanor says, and once we're sure of that, then we both go in. Together, Barry. Now this drawing is a little interesting because Eleanor seems to be draped all over Barry Allen. It seems like there might be a little bit of romantic tension here. Could you imagine if Absolute Reverse Flash in this universe hates Barry Allen simply because he's dating his granddaughter? That would be absolutely hilarious. Afterwards, Barry Allen leaves the facility and heads to the cafeteria for some food. He walks up to a redhead kid that he sees and asks if the seat's taken, and the kid, Wally West, says, no, I guess not. He introduces himself and says, I'm Dr. Allen. Barry, you must be the new kid, Colonel West's son. And he's like, yeah, Wally, how did you... Barry cuts him off and says, just met your dad. Seems like a barrel of laughs. And Wally says, yeah, he's a pretty serious guy most of the time, I guess. And Barry says, how about you? What's your story? And Wally says, I don't really know. Just trying to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do around here. Barry says, move around a lot, huh? I did too. My dad was a Marine. And Wally's like, really? And Barry says, uh-huh. And Barry says, uh-huh. Didn't live in one place more than a year and a half until I was 18 and went to school. Wally asks him where he went to school, and Barry says, MIT. Wally says, I hate math and science. Barry says, yeah, what are you into then? And Wally says, I don't know, music mostly. Barry says, well, music is just math when you think about it. Everything is math, really. Once you realize that, the whole universe opens up to you. Wally says, you're kind of a weird guy, Dr. Allen. And Barry says, takes one to know one, kid. Well, I guess I'll see you around, Wally. As he walks out the door, he says, and hang in there. Things will get better. I promise. We then find Barry and Eleanor back at the lab about to begin trial 1. Barry says, okay, one last comms check. All of you sound off. And the 3 members all check in. Hendricks, Kerwin, and Ellis. I tried to do some research to find out if any of those names are references to other DC characters and I couldn't find anything. If you guys know if they are references, please let me know. The ball of energy opens back up and it opens a portal to a different dimension. The team of 3 begin to walk through the portal and Hendricks says, wish us luck. And Barry says, there is no luck, Hendricks, only probability. bodies. They come out the other side of the portal and one of them says, "It's everywhere, Dr. Allen. Do you see it? The energy field, the red matter?" Barry, looking through a camera, says, "Incredible. We need to get soil samples, atmospheric readings. We need it all." But the 3 team members turn around and they see something, and one of them says, "My God, are you seeing this?" And Eleanor says, "What? What is it?" And it's revealed to be a giant alien ship on this planet. And one of the team members says, "I don't think we were the first ones here." A couple hours later, the team has managed to get this alien ship in the building. Eleanor says, "The trials on the apes are incredibly promising. We're going to move ahead with human trials soon. Colonel West is gathering a team of candidates." But Barry says, "That's none of my business, Eleanor. None of this is why you brought me here. I want to go in. I want to start harvesting some of the red matter." She says, "Soon, Barry. The away team has almost finished transporting all the alien tech across." Barry says, "This super soldier bullshit is just supposed to be our cover story. You've lost sight of our work, or your grandfather's work." Eleanor is very mad about this. She turns around and says, "How dare you say that? I've dedicated my life to finishing what my grandfather started, and we will. But you know as well as I do, the red matter is too dangerous to make direct contact with. The alien technology and specimens are a boon we never expected. It buys us time to study the energy, learn what it truly is before we risk bringing any back here. We need to be very careful, Barry, or we will end up just like my grandfather, destroyed by the very thing he coveted." Barry says, "I know that, Eleanor. I do. It's just..." Eleanor says, "What? What is it, Barry?" And he walks away and says, "Nothing. It's nothing." Barry sulks and walks up to the machine and hears a voice call his name. Barry asks, Who are you? Thawne?" It continues to call out the name and it says, "Help me." The red energy touches Barry and it says, "Help." And all of a sudden, that future version of Barry Allen that was in a previous issue wearing the suit comes out of nowhere to the past. And he tells Barry, "Stop. You must stop. Wally, it must be Wally West," before quickly vanishing away, leaving Barry absolutely stunned. Now, this is a crazy revelation because it looks like Barry was purposely trying to get close with Wally because this happened. He was trying to use Wally as the experiment the entire time. This is a crazy twist that I most definitely did not see coming. Now, this was a really solid issue in my opinion. It does a lot to build the story. Even though the Absolute Flash series has kind of jumped all over the place, I still feel like this was a solid issue. Anyways, guys, that's the end of the issue. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about Absolute Flash, about this issue, and I will see you guys in the next video.